Will they have blue skies?
What the parents need to realize is that the moment the child is born, it's already really brilliant.
Both sides of the brain are connected by a giant telephone system, the corpus callosum, which shuttles messages back and forth millions of times a second.
The year prior to our teachers being trained in integrative accelerative learning techniques, only 27% of our kids were making a year's growth for a year's instruction. A year subsequent to that training, that rate went to 54%.
We'd like to introduce you to a book that will change your life, your family's life, and your business life. It also shows in simple graphic terms how to change the way the world learns in the 21st century.
It's called The Learning Revolution, and it's already the best-selling book around the world.
The Mandarin edition has sold 7.5 million copies in China in less than 6 months.
In Sweden alone, it sold over 35,000 copies. And I've trained about 25,000 people to use the methodologies that are in this book.
And in my home country, the New Zealand edition has sold 30,000 copies in a nation of under 4 million people. That's equal to more than 2 million copies in North America.
In a nutshell, The Learning Revolution is a book that helps you to learn anything more effectively, more easily. In fact, it's for students, it's for parents, it's for business people, it's for teachers, it's just for anyone.
The Learning Revolution as a book came about by an amazing coincidence. We two co-authors first met completely by accident when we sat next to each other at an international conference on new methods of learning. I was just completing 6 television documentaries exploring the world's best learning breakthroughs.
And I had just completed a 7-year research project. In fact, a doctoral dissertation encompassing the best learning and teaching methods from all over the world.
When we swapped research, my television programs and Jeanette Voss's giant doctoral dissertation, we found the similarities were amazing.
What we both discovered, that there are simple, easy ways to unlock the human potential of the brain.
Since then, we've traveled the world finding even newer and better methods to change the way the world learns. But the learning revolution is a twofold one. On the one hand is the tremendous revolution in instant communications. For the first time in history, we now know how to store all the world's information and knowledge and make it available almost instantly in almost any form to almost anyone on Earth.
And the other part of the learning revolution is that we each have the most powerful computer right between our ears. And we only use a fraction of that potential.
But we've found out much, much more. We've found that each one of us has a unique personal learning style, as unique as our individual fingerprints. And millions of people are failing our school systems because their school's teaching style does not match many important learning styles.
We've also found that intelligence is not fixed. In fact, we have many different kinds of intelligences, multiple intelligences, and they are just waiting to be developed.
Some of our findings are truly revolutionary. They turn traditional beliefs about education and learning upside down and inside out.
For example, we have found that about 50% of one's ability to learn is developed in the first 4 years of life.
That does not mean 50% of one's intelligence, or 50% of one's knowledge, or 50% of one's wisdom. But it does mean that 50% of the main learning pathways in our brain are laid down in those vital first years. This means that parents are the world's most important educators, and home the most important school.
Hello, Elsie. I'm happy to see you.
Joy Rouse is a parent educator in the American state of Missouri, and she's taking part in a highly successful program to help parents of young children to be their infants' first teachers.
I go into their homes and talk with the moms and dads about child development, support their family structure, and do activities with the child, things that are appropriate to the child's age and the child's stage of development.
Which one of these balls would match?
No.
Right, that's where it goes. Good girl, that matches.
I take things for the parent and for the youngster. I will take appropriate activities for the child to be involved with. Sometimes it will be prepared materials, but often it's going to involve things that the parent has in the home. We want parents to know they don't have to buy expensive playthings to have appropriate activities for their child. So I will bring in something that fits the child's level of development, that the parent can see, oh yeah, this is something my child is finding interesting, and I can do this after my parent educator leaves. Because it's not what we do in the visit, but how the parent carries through with that makes the program have the greatest impact. This is the handout I'd like you to have today, Beth. This goes with the development we've seen so much of with Kelsey. She's just doing wonderfully. Her language is blossoming. This one in particular has to do with her intellectual development and how indeed we have seen her match objects that are alike. Problems. Yes, here you are. You know how to solve problems in a logical way. She grouped things together. She could see the likenesses, see the differences, and beyond that, she was looking at color and she was looking at shape. Are you hugging me? And loving mommy. I'm glad you love your mommy. All this stuff you don't see in a younger child. It's great to see it in a 2-year-old.
And in the Learning Revolution, we have assembled the world's most practical models to raise brighter, healthier, and happier children.
I've personally videotaped dozens of migrant youngsters in Sweden who are fluent in at least 3 languages by age 4. Sweden has taken in migrants and refugees from over 100 different countries. If they're adults, they're helped to learn English as a second language. And their families attend preschool centres and schools where all are taught in both Swedish and their own native tongue.
We think it's very important that a child, for instance, with parents who speak another language should have the right to learn his or her home language, and we support that already in the preschool. I think the present figure is 114 other languages taught in our schools.
Nearly all the youngsters at this Swedish daycare centre come from other countries, such as Turkey and Egypt and Lebanon. But they all have teachers who can speak their own native language as well as Swedish. Like many new migrants in New Zealand and other countries, these youngsters' parents work long hours to build a stake in their new country. So this daycare centre is open from 6:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. About 70 infants attend this centre, and after school they're joined by their older brothers and sisters. Most Swedish youngsters attend preschool centres, at least part-time, from as early as 18 months of age.
Fortunately, we have also discovered some truly amazing methods for students to catch up, even if they are years behind.
In New Zealand, I've videotaped highly successful school programs where youngsters years behind in their reading are now making remarkable gains. Some of the youngsters at Flaxmere Primary School in Hawke's Bay were up to 5 years behind in their average reading age. Yet they've been able to catch up in only 8 weeks. They've done it with 2 programs. The first is called Tape-Assisted Learning.
They played on the sand. They played in the sea. What an adventure, said Beth.
Basically, each child is encouraged to read books of his own choice on subjects that interest him. But when he reads each book, he can hear the same story on tape through his earphones.
Pirates!
Tape-assisted reading involves a self-management type of approach with reading, so that the reader is actually selecting books which they want to read, reading them at times when they want to read them, as many times as they'd like, before they actually try to read them to somebody else.
When he feels confident enough, the teacher checks his progress.
That's really good.
And how simple is it to catch up?
Well, some of the best results we've had have been 4 to 5 years reading gain over approximately 8 weeks on the program, so that's big progress.
The second reading recovery program at Flaxmere Primary School is called peer tutoring. One pupil simply acts as a mini teacher with another pupil, and generally the mini-teacher is only a little bit more advanced, so both the tutor and his buddy benefit.
We had tutors who came into the program reading about a year to a year and a half below their chronological age, and they made up to 2 years gains after working on the program for about 10 weeks.
Over 6 months, the average gain for tutors was 4 years, and for the slower learners, just over 2 years. Many New Zealand families now have English as a second language, which can also cause school delays. And here in Otara, in South Auckland, 10 years ago, some able educators came up with a 4-minute reading program. Through it, youngsters starting school with reading ability 2 years behind the national average were given special assistance. The key was to get community volunteers going into homes and helping parents with a simple daily list of words. 4-minute swat at night and a 4-minute teacher check in the morning, and it was on to the next list. Yet within 2 months, virtually every one of those youngsters had caught up an average of 2 years in reading age. Yet today, 10 years later, Bruce McLaren Intermediate here in Henderson is one of the few schools still carrying out the full 4-minute reading program with brilliant results. And instead of taking the program home to parents, they've brought parent helpers to the school. 12 help out part-time. The daily list of words is for each child, designed for particular weak spots. But even the senior teacher was a bit reluctant when asked to introduce the program, saying, "What can you do in 4 minutes?"
I said I would, and I tried it out, and I thought I'd soon show him that it wouldn't work. But when I started it, the children just zoomed up in their reading. They were absolutely amazing, and I was just sold on it.
And if you haven't learned a foreign language in your preschool years, it's not too late to catch up. In fact, you can learn it the way young children do.
Australian television, for instance, has videotaped an entire high school class which has effectively compressed a 3-year French language course into 8 weeks, with all children speaking French fluently in that time.
The learning revolution also proves that it's never too late to start learning.
So what are some of the main secrets we've discovered to unlock your own unique ability to learn faster and better and more easily? First key principle, if you want to learn it, do it. We all learn to walk by walking, to talk by talking, to ride a bike by riding a bike, to learn a computer by actually using a computer. And you can and should apply the same principle to everything.
For example, you can learn mathematics in the kitchen. Learn fractions by cutting up a pizza. First, into 2 halves. Then, cutting the halves into quarters. And now, cutting them into eighths.
In fact, even infants can learn mathematics and much, much more very easily by the new gentle revolution. In California, it's enabling the 3-year-old children of poor Mexican fruit pickers to end up as well-fed and gifted children. The Mexican children attend a preschool centre in the country in California. It's one of 18 such centres set up as a research experiment. The methods are based on the principles of the famed Italian educator Maria Montessori. The children may come from poor backgrounds, but they're getting preschool education that ranks among the best in the world. The children sit in child-sized chairs, at child-sized tables, use tools and implements specially designed for small hands. They also learn advanced mathematics the Montessori way and enjoy it. Each classroom has a variety of animals that also form the basis for learning.
The major job of the adult, of the teacher, is to provide the children with as many opportunities in all of their various areas, whether it's cultural or science or art or music, or math or language, to provide as many opportunities that are age appropriate and sequentially developed, you know.
Something to eat is served every 2 hours, with each meal a lesson in diet and nutrition. Low-fat soups, brown rice instead of polished, whole wheat tortillas instead of white flour tortillas. Parents also learn healthy eating along with their children. And it doesn't stop with nutrition.
We give each family member, male, female, siblings, and the child a physical each year. And we, at that point, are able to help the parent understand what the family's health condition is.
It must be one of the world's best preschool environments. A warm, enjoyable feeling comes through from all the activities, from youngsters, from teachers, and from parents. If one of the first principles of learning how to learn is to do it, the second is to play with it. From the very first day they're born, babies soak up knowledge like a sponge, as Tony Buzan, the inventor of mind mapping, has stressed.
I'm now a 3-month-old baby. You've given me this piece of paper. You know it's not going to last long. Now, do I do it like this? Or do I do it like this? It's obviously the second way. What that baby was doing was being a little Isaac Newton, the perfect scientist. What kind of musical instruments can I make from this material? What is the sociological, economic exchange value of this material? Anybody wants some? What is the engineering, mechanical, tensile strength of the material? Stick it in the chemical laboratory. Not so good. Check the musical instrument and on to the next experiment. Now, the baby is using all of its brain. Logic, yes. Analysis, yes. Rhythm, yes. Everything, yes. So what the parents need to realize is that the moment the child is born, it's already really brilliant. And that it picks up language, which is much better than a PhD in any subject, in only 2 years, and is a master at it by 3 or 4.
Yet when they go to school, we all too often put them in an environment where learning becomes dull and boring.
We almost treat them like aging adults. Yet, the research shows that in every adult, there's a child waiting to come out. And learning is much more effective when it's fun.
We've also found that traditional high schools in particular are not the most effective way of teaching teenagers. One of our favourite schools in Alaska has its students themselves actually running 4 pilot companies as they learn marketing, Japanese, Russian, Chinese, science and dozens of other skills. One of those student-run companies has even sold one $600,000 order of smoked salmon to Japan. Its students learn by doing.
We also encourage students, teachers, and trainers to use hands-on learning with lots of fun activities. For example, using puppets, props, hats, games, toys. And if you're studying Russia, use a Russian hat. If you're studying China, use a Chinese hat. Make it fun.
And to link that in with dance and song and movement. This is how generation after generation of Polynesian peoples have learned their culture. It's been passed down through song and dance. This group from Rutherford High in Auckland not only wins awards for its singing, its members have composed the words as well. Song and dance, of course, combines 3 learning paths: seeing, hearing, and moving. Generally, most of us have 1, or sometimes 2, preferred learning styles: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, or movement.
Some people are very, very visual. In fact, if you've ever seen visual people, they move very, very quickly, they walk around, they talk fast, they talk in a very, very high-pitched voice, and you can't get them to stay still for a minute. They seem to have a lot of energy, and how they learn best is by learning things through pictures. Now, of course, there are also those people who learn more auditorily. They speak a lot more clearly, they slow down. Their clothes are a lot neater. They love to listen to the sound of the birds. Auditory people don't buy cars because of what they look like. They buy cars that have good stereo systems inside. And of course, the feeling people of the group. the kinesthetics, the 35% of the world that understands everything by how it feels. If it doesn't feel right, they don't do it. If they can't sense the meaning in it...
The students here include top business people and teachers, learning how to learn with accelerated learning techniques. They're out on an educational weekend aboard the Spirit of New Zealand. Generally, you'll find school-age youngsters sailing on the Spirit of New Zealand, not businessmen and women. Along with its sister ship, the Spirit of Adventure, the Spirit of New Zealand provides an example, an excellent one, of how much better it is to learn by doing. Proof that learning can be fun, as our business types are about to discover.
Ichini. San, she go rock.
They learn how to count in Japanese, using all their senses. And Spanish is covered too. Experienced teachers say these techniques can help you learn most things at least 2 to 3 times faster.
After having been a language teacher for the last 20 years, I must say I have never seen such drastic changes in people. We all know that during the first 5 years of our life, we learn whatever is necessary. But when we get older, we use other ways of learning, and then the learning doesn't work so well. So what we want to do is to put the natural approach to learning back into our system.
But some of the most amazing discoveries of all concern the human brain.
We found out more about the human brain in the last 10 to 15 years than the rest of recorded history. And that knowledge has the power to change the way the world learns.
Firstly, we've discovered that we each have at least 4 brains in one. The first part of our brain is the brainstem, at the top of the spinal column. It's our instinctive brain. Some scientists also call it the reptilian brain, because it's very similar to the total brain of most reptiles, of snakes and crocodiles.
We actually get students to play with these concepts by wearing hats such as this funny reptile brain hat, and then wearing it, and then miming what we do instinctively, such as breathing and heartbeat.
The middle part of our brain is sometimes called the mammalian brain, because it's similar to the main part of the brain of other mammals such as cats and dogs. And again, we encourage youngsters to play with the concept using cat hats and dog hats.
It's also the emotional brain. It's vital for learning. Emotion is the door to learning, and emotion is the key to unlocking the subconscious mind. And when we learn things with an emotional state, we deepen the learning.
Significantly, the producers of television commercials seem to know this better than many schools. They use music and mood and emotion as key elements of most TV commercials.
The emotional brain is also very closely related to our long-term memory banks. The more you can hook or anchor emotion to learning, the more effectively you will learn.
Sitting on top of the mammalian brain is the unique human cortex. It sits up here like a thin, crumpled blanket, and it enables us to see, to hear, to touch, to think, to reason, to write, to paint, to create, and most of the other things that make us uniquely human.
The cortex has a left side and a right side. The left side is the more academic part of the brain. It processes words, logic, numbers, mathematics. The right side is the more creative part of the brain. This processes music, pictures, rhyme, and rhythm.
If you're listening to a song, the left brain would be processing the words and the right brain would be processing the music. And it's no accident that we learn the words of popular songs very easily. You don't make any effort to do that, but you do learn very quickly because the left brain and the right brain are both involved, and also the emotional center of the brain.
Both sides of the brain are connected by a giant telephone system, the corpus callosum, which shuttles messages back and forth millions of times a second.
At the lower back of the brain is the cerebellum, which literally means the little brain. It's the part of the brain that processes muscle memory, one of the most vital learning ingredients of all. There are, of course, many other fascinating parts of the brain, like the amygdala, which acts like a warning gatekeeper or fireman.
This is the part of the brain that alerts us, makes us afraid, gets us into stress. For example, when you hear a fire engine, woo, 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 what do? You get kind of uptight and you pull your car aside or you wonder, where's the fire? That's exactly what happens in the brain. It's as if we hear a big alert sign saying, there's a fire, and we then downshift. And all of a sudden, it's more difficult to learn.
But all this brain knowledge isn't mere theory. It's revolutionizing education in vital pockets around the world. This is one of the poorest districts of Chicago. 85% of the families who live here are officially below the poverty line. A big proportion of adults live on social welfare. 6 years ago, their children's futures were bleak. Their school had one of the worst scholastic records in all the United States. Today, everything has changed. Simon Guggenheim School is now regarded as an international model on how to turn a school disaster into a success.
Southwest, Eastern, 5 years of Indians, California Plains, 5 areas of Indians, woodlands, 5 years of Indians, made up USA.
In national tests, its pupils have caught up and passed others because their school has adopted some of the world's most effective methods of quick learning, from rhyme to rhythm to music and song. Now even its primary school pupils are learning to speak fluent Spanish.
Yes, I'm here to explain things in English to you.
They're learning with puppet shows, drama and song and music. And it works. Accelerated learning is often called multi-sensory learning. Again, learning with all the senses.
In other words, you have to surround them with the information, visually, auditorily, and physically. That's the key thing with accelerated learning. Our self-image probably is the most important thing in determining whether we're good learners, or frankly, we're good at anything else.
Something.
Guggenheim kids do feel good about themselves now and about their school. A few years ago, the school was a failure and in danger of being shut by the local Board of Education. Now there's a waiting list to get in, and they've found learning can be fun.
What's unusual about this school is a fun place to be, and it's a place where people throw aside all the roles that are generally germane to education, where teachers act one way and students act one way and administrators act one way. Everybody is focused in on creating an atmosphere of joy and learning for children, and people move into any role that's necessary in order to facilitate that. Academic performance changed dramatically over the past 5 or 6 years. The year prior to our teachers being trained in integrative accelerative learning techniques, only 27% of our kids were making a year's growth for a year's instruction. A year subsequent to that training, that rate went to 54%. In math, it went from 38% to like 58%.
Guggenheim's breakthroughs don't end in the classroom. The school runs its own breakfast and lunch program, with meals high in nutrition. At its simplest, you can't learn if you're hungry. Yet looking at these youngsters, it's hard to believe that 85% of their families have incomes below the poverty line.
Students walk through the hall now very polite, very respectful. Again, overhearing children on the play lot They talk about their school becoming the school of the future. We use accelerated learning. We're going to be the most sophisticated school in the city in terms of utilizing computer technology. We have Spanish in our school. We have Tai Chi in our school, they tell their friends, and they're very excited about it.
So are the parents. An average of 25 turn up each day to help out. This year, Simon Guggenheim School has even installed a new computer facility to help parents as well as students break out of the poverty trap. And if they can do it, why can't we? In preparing the Total Learning Revolution program, we've linked together some of the key principles of the communications revolution and the revolution in neuroscience. For example, our book has been typeset by the authors on a simple computer program.
Every left-hand side of the book highlights the information of the text opposite, and you can reproduce the poster page to enlarge it into a poster.
But we've gone even further. We've now produced a CD-ROM, a computerized compact disc, that provides 16 separate colour slide presentations on the Learning Revolution, one for each chapter in the book. You can show this as a series of PowerPoint presentations, with or without a recorded commentary.
You can print these out as colour posters on any subject of the book.
This, in fact, is an important part of the teaching revolution. Most of us learn things much more subconsciously than we do consciously, so that if posters covering any subject are displayed around a room, every student has a regular subconscious reminder of the key points.
Teachers can also print our colour slides and use them as transparencies for the overhead projector.
But these posters and slides are only the main outlines of your amazing personal computer. Tap into its real strengths and you start tapping into the incredible potential of the human brain.
The brain is made of a million brain cells. And each one of those million brain cells is many times more powerful and sophisticated than most of the computers that are around on the planet today. Been called an enchanted loom, the most astoundingly complex, beautiful thing that the human race has ever discovered, and it's inside our heads, and each person has one.
Of those trillion brain cells, 100 billion of them are active neurons in your cortex. Each one of them is capable of making up to 20,000 different connections.
And those connections are the key to learning.
A fruit fly has 100,000 active brain cells. A mouse has 5 million. A monkey 10 million. But we're each born with 100 billion.
After birth, those cells start forming new learning connections at an incredible rate of approximately 3 billion per second. Those connections are the secret to brain power.
Their development also demonstrates the amazing ability of the brain to learn best in the early years of life. For example, around 70 sounds make up all the main languages on Earth. A tiny baby babbles in all of those 70 sounds. But if she doesn't hear those sounds regularly, she'll prune off the brain cells used to process them. And she will then learn only the sounds of her native language, the language of her parents and friends.
That's one of the reasons why people in Sweden can learn to speak English at a very young age. They listen to American and English television programs that are broadcast, and this is without translation. And as a result, young children can learn to speak English very quickly and easily because they are surrounded by it.
We also know that the brain transmits on different wavelengths, just like a radio or television transmitter. And while some of those wavelengths are better to use while driving or running, others are better for learning new information.
We can also alter those wavelengths by changing the atmosphere or the mood. One way to do that is with music. You can take upbeat music and change your state into being more wide awake. And then you can take softer music to make you more relaxed.
In general, you're best to be in a wide awake state, the beta wavelengths, when you're using information you already know, like driving a car through thick traffic. But you'd find it almost impossible to learn a foreign language from your car radio while coping with the rush hour traffic in downtown Los Angeles.
To learn new information, such as a foreign language, it's best to do this in a more relaxed wavelength, without any distractions. Scientists call this the alpha state, the state of relaxed alertness.
Amazingly, if you can activate this alpha state, You can learn new information very quickly and almost without effort.
This is one of the ways in which music plays such an important part in learning, often the most neglected part of learning. Simply, music can surf the information right into the brain.
But what else makes up the learning revolution?
We all learn best if we can see the big picture first. It's something like a jigsaw puzzle. Once you see the big picture, then it's easier to assemble all those thousands of pieces and put them back together.
Let's take the English language as an example, whether teaching it to an infant or teaching it as a foreign language.
The English language has more than 500,000 words, more than any other language on earth. They come from Latin, French, Italian, German, and even the ancient Vikings.
Tell a Chinese college student that English has 550,000 words and his brain will almost certainly downshift into its reptilian, fearful state. He's probably spent 12 years learning only 18,000 Chinese characters, and now he thinks he has to learn 500,000 to be fluent in English.
But only 2,000 words make up 90% of spoken English. So knowing that big picture makes learning English so much easier.
Amazingly, only about 400 words make up 65% of most written English, even in books for adults. They're the small linking words that you find in most sentences. And that part of the big picture makes it easier still.
You can write all those 500,000 words in English using only the 26 letters of the alphabet.
And of the 70 sounds in all the major languages of the world, most English dialects use a maximum of 44 sounds.
Surprisingly, those 500,000 English words are spelled using only 70 main English spelling combinations.
Also, about half the words in English are phonetic. They're spelt approximately as they sound, so that if you have learned cat and mat and bat, you can easily work out how to pronounce fat and sat.
But around half the words in English are not phonetic.
Again, the Learning Revolution program enables you to print out a colourful poster to show you all that big picture.
And of course you need to hear the language, use the language, and play with the language.
And you can start with your children as young as you like.
Who's that? Who is that? Find him? Where is he? It is Beethoven. He couldn't hear, could he? No.
And the first time you start teaching your child, and the first information you give them, and you see the response, this is in my 18-month-old, and you see the look in their eyes, you're hooked. I mean, that look is so magical and so precious, and you realize the incredible gift that you're able to give them.
Shall we do some classification? All right. Okay, we have amphibia, and these animals can live on land and water.
10 years ago, Barbara Montgomery was a leading American television talk show host. When her first child was 18 months old, she attended a series of lectures on child development. Then she quit work to become a full-time parent educator.
He's a mammal, isn't he?
The lectures she came to were here in Philadelphia, on America's East Coast. Each year, hundreds of parents from dozens of countries come here to learn about child development. And the man they come to listen to is Glenn Doman, a sometimes controversial pioneer in the infant development movement. A man who's probably best known for encouraging youngsters to read.
It's frightening. Our jails are full of people who are in jail because they can't read. I mean, there's no crime called not being able to read. Problem is, if you can't read, you can't earn a living. And if you can't earn a living, you pick up a club and then you end up in jail. The people are really there because they can't read.
Glenn Doman believes it's as easy for youngsters to learn to read as it is to learn to talk. And they do it in exactly the same way, just as they pick up words and pictures from a television screen.
The dragonfly does not look like a fly.
It does not look like
a dragon.
Glenn Doman says tiny infants can't learn to read most books because the type is too small. Their visual pathways to their brains are not yet that developed.
Along comes television and somebody screams, S-O, 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 or Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. And here's the message in large letters. And the 2-year-olds said have broken the code. Now they can read because the message was large enough to be interpreted.
We've got the grey fox here, the black bear, and the African elephant. Which one? Did you want the grey fox?
So Doman parents not only talk new words to their youngsters loudly and clearly, they show them the words in big type, just like they do in TV commercials or on company billboards.
It is the only New World member of the family capable of climbing trees.
But most experts say that having natural fun with your youngsters is much more important than more specific teaching.
Personally, I believe in giving a broad input of general stimulation for the young. I don't believe in focusing too early on reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's important for them to be out of doors, to pick up the various sounds, the natural sounds, as much as possible when they're little. And then when they go to school, then they have the building blocks to begin to learn to read, to do these things. To keep the brain working well, we need the muscles working well. So exercise is indeed beneficial. But to keep the muscles working well, we need the blood vessels working well. We need healthy hearts. We need healthy lungs. All of these things work together.
If you are forcing your child, it is wrong. It's very wrong, and you should never do it. If you are enjoying teaching your children, it's a wonderful thing, because you are not, the whole idea is that you are not pushing and you are not forcing. It should be an enjoyable, pleasurable experience, and if it isn't, don't do it.
Indeed, we have a fail-safe law. We teach all mothers this law. When teaching your child, if you aren't having the time of your life and the child isn't having the time of his life, stop, because you're doing something wrong.
Another key aspect of the learning revolution, we each learn best in our own unique way. I, for instance, am a morning person. I generally read a new book each morning before I get out of bed, and I can learn easily by reading books. But only a minority of people learn best in that way.
But I'm an evening person. I tend to work late. And I also like to exercise and swim to keep myself fit so that I'm in good shape for learning.
We also each have a different preferred way of taking in information, of storing information, and of retrieving information. For instance, I can take in information easily by reading, but I store information physically by underlining key points of a book and physically typing out a summary. And I retrieve information visually by actually seeing color slides of the information.
Since no two human brains are alike, each one should try to find out what his or her strengths are.
One of the things I think is crucial, first of all, is to determine a particular student's learning style. Now, there are some students who are very visual. They have to see everything. Others don't particularly want to see something written down. They're more auditory types. Others are kinesthetic. They have to stand up and move. They learn even abstract things by moving their bodies.
Overwhelmingly, it's the kinesthetic learner who misses out in school. This is the learner that needs a physical mode to learn. For example, he or she needs to move to learn. They need to dance. They need to touch things. They need to do things. So what happens? They get labeled as hyperactive, or they get labeled as attention deficit disorder when they only have a kinesthetic learning style.
The obvious answer is for each school to identify each student's preferred learning style and cater to it.
We also have an individual working style and an individual thinking style. And it's important that we identify those two, just as we've done in the learning revolution.
Closely allied with learning styles is the whole question of intelligence.
We now know that we have many different kinds of intelligence, and every single human being is potentially gifted in their own way. And it's vital that parents and teachers identify and build on those gifts and intelligences.
In fact, of those various forms of multiple intelligence, probably the best basic model is that developed by Professor Howard Gardner of Harvard. We've taken that and combined it with other models.
One kind of intelligence is logical intelligence, the mathematical intelligence, the kind that is often used in traditional IQ tests.
Another is linguistic intelligence, the ability to read and write and speak and listen, to communicate with words. Most traditional teaching concentrates mainly on only those two forms of intelligence.
Another form of intelligence is the physical intelligence, the bodily intelligence, the kinesthetic intelligence, the kind that is exemplified by top sports figures. In America, this is rewarded. At the end of high school, if someone is good at a certain sport, they then are given a scholarship to go to college. What a pity that these other intelligences are not rewarded all throughout school, just like the bodily kinesthetic one is rewarded at the end of high school.
Then there's musical intelligence, one of the forms where Jeanette Voss really shines.
And then there's visual intelligence, the gifts that come from wonderful artists and film directors, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Steven Spielberg, and Walt Disney.
Then there's spatial intelligence, the genius of our designers and architects and sculptors.
And social intelligence, the ability to relate to others, sometimes called the interpersonal intelligence.
Then there's intrapersonal intelligence, introspective intelligence, the ability to probe inside oneself.
And one of the most important of all, the inventive intelligence, the ability to create our own futures by combining new elements of knowledge, new experiences to come up with a whole new idea.
In our view, all good schools should cater to all different forms of intelligence, and not just the two that many schools have largely concentrated on.
Inside of this cocoon is a beautiful butterfly just waiting to emerge. Likewise, in all of us is a potential genius just waiting to emerge. And so, what is it that can enable this butterfly to emerge? An enriched environment. That's the key.
It's also vital to create the right environment for learning. Almost 100 years ago, Maria Montessori, the famous Italian educator, was proving this in practice. By creating the right environment for young children to flower into learning, she was showing how so-called mentally defective infants could speak and read and write fluently by age 4.
So how does a flower grow? By enriching the environment in which it's planted so that it bursts forth naturally.
We all argue strongly that the world needs a thinking revolution as well as a learning revolution. We each need to continually reinvent our own future.
I often use the analogy of a turtle. The turtle doesn't move unless he sticks his neck out. It's important to risk when you're thinking. It's important to go outside of the shell and then to learn from any feedback that you've been given.
In fact, one of our main objections to the traditional school system is the way it insists that there is only one correct answer to any question, when there may in fact be dozens.
In the Learning Revolution, we make several suggestions on how students of all ages can learn how to stretch themselves.
That means accepting that we all have our own comfort zone.
And we need to learn to jump outside of that comfort zone. In many ways, it's like young birds learning to fly. They have to be willing to make that first jump and no longer be afraid. Then they will learn to soar.
In our section on creating new ideas, we've collected suggestions from around the world, from Edward de Bono to Tom Peters.
The Learning Revolution is also very much about developing self-esteem. In fact, self-esteem is at the very heart of learning.
We all become what we think we can become. As Henry Ford put it, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Children all too often become what other people think they should become.
I often perform in a jail suit to demonstrate what happens when teachers and parents focus on the negative qualities of children rather than the positive strengths. And so when they are regarded as a failure, they become a failure.
Inside everyone is a potential genius waiting to come out.
And if a teacher or parent cuts off that potential, it's like cutting off the future before it has a chance to develop.
Put all that together, and a lot more, and you've got the basis for a learning revolution and a thinking revolution.
But we stress, this is a gentle revolution, a revolution that can flower and should flower from inside each one of us.
We also stress that the revolution is still in progress. Over the past 10 years and more, Jeanette Voss and I have separately collected together the best ideas on learning and the best practical breakthroughs from right around the world.
We've assembled them in a book, on a CD-ROM, and on a unique website.
But we've stressed they're a smorgasbord of ideas. From them, we invite you to choose those that suit you best, your family best, your learning style best.
Above all, the learning revolution is an invitation for you to invent your own future.
We invite you to use it as your personal passport to the 21st century. A simple, easy guide to change the way the world learns.
We've got to leave them a future.